The harvesting facilities stretched beneath the ice for hundreds of kilometers. Vast chambers filled with crystalline matrices that hummed with stolen consciousness. And Captain Chai Wonshik led the first human team into the frozen depths. Min Jun Kang walked beside him, serving as witness for the galactic community. And what they found in those chambers would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. Millions of human consciousness fragments floated within the crystals. Pieces of thought and memory and dream torn from minds that had never known they were being violated. Children's nightmares hung preserved in amber. Light elderly dreams of distant youth remained frozen in time. The hopes and fears of an entire species had been catalogued and stored like specimens. In some terrible museum, they sorted them by type, Wonshik whispered, and his voice cracked with emotion that 8 billion minds could not fully contain. They organized our dreams like products on shelves. He reached out and touched one of the crystalline matrices, and Minjun watched tears roll down the captain's face. We felt them die, Wonshik continued. Every time a fragment was extracted, every time a piece of our collective soul was torn away. We felt it in our sleep and did not understand what we were feeling. He turned to face the Dralith technicians who had surrendered the facility without resistance. How could you do this? He asked. And his question held no anger, only profound confusion. The senior technician, an ancient being named Zalithus, lowered his eyes in something that might have been shame. We were told that humans were not truly conscious, he replied. That your dreams were merely neural noise with no genuine awareness behind them. He gestured at the vast chamber around them. We were told that harvesting would not harm you, that you would never know the difference. And we believed these lies because believing made our work easier to bear. Wonshik stared at him for a long moment. And now that you know the truth, Zalithus met his gaze. Now I understand that I have participated in atrocities that no justification can excuse. And I will spend whatever years remain to me trying to undo the damage I helped cause. The reclamation process began on Earth. 8 billion humans entered the deepest dream state they had ever achieved, reaching across the void toward the crystalline matrices that held their stolen essence. And one by one the fragments began to flow home. Minjun watched in awe as the crystals dimmed and went dark, their contents returning to the minds from which they had been taken. And he felt something like warmth spreading through the frozen chamber. They are coming back to us, Wonshik said softly, and his voice held joy that made the previous grief seem like a distant memory. The process took 17 hours when it ended. The harvesting facilities held nothing but empty matrices and the ghosts of crimes that could never be fully erased. The human fleet departed the Dralith homeworld without destroying a single building or taking a single life beyond. Those lost in battle, they left behind a civilization shattered by defeat, but still standing, still capable of rebuilding, still given the chance to become something better than they had been. Vorentas was captured by his own people 3 cycles later, delivered to the Galactic Council in chains to face judgment for his violations of the Celestial Accord. The trial lasted only a single session. Representatives from 400 species watched as evidence of the harvesting was presented in meticulous detail. And when the verdict came, not a single voice spoke in the former elder's defense. He was not executed. Instead, the council imposed a punishment that the ancient being found far more devastating. Stripped of his elder race status, he would spend the remainder of his existence as an ordinary citizen, subject to the same laws and limitations as the species he had once considered beneath notice. The Dralith Dominion received similar treatment. Their elder race privileges were revoked, their military reduced to defensive capabilities only, and their civilization placed under observation by the same monitoring division that had first discovered their crimes. They would have to earn their way back to galactic standing through demonstrated commitment to the values they had once helped establish, and humanity took their place. Among the elder races, the ceremony occurred in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, the same chamber where Ambassador Yan-Su Park had first presented evidence of the harvesting, and representatives from across the galaxy gathered to witness history being made. A young woman named Seo Yin stood at the speaking platform, her eyes holding wisdom that her years could not explain, and she addressed the assembled species with a voice that carried the weight of 8 billion minds. "We did not seek this position," she announced, and the chamber fell silent. "We did not awaken because we wanted power or influence, but because those who considered themselves gods decided that our dreams were theirs to take." She paused and looked around at faces representing more diversity than human imagination had ever conceived. The Celestial Accord was created to prevent what happened to us, and it failed because those who enforced it believed themselves above its requirements. Her expression hardened. "We will not make the same mistake." She raised her hand, and holographic text appeared in the air above the platform. "The Accord is amended with one addition. No species sleeps forever, and those who prey upon dreamers will face the waking." The words hung in the air for a long moment. "This is not a threat," Seo Yan continued. "This is a promise, because humanity has learned what happens when guardians forget their purpose. And we will ensure that no developing species ever suffers as we did." The council voted unanimously to accept the amendment. Su Park watched from the observation gallery as the ceremony concluded, and she felt something she had not experienced in 15 cycles of service. Hope for the future. Minjun Kang stood beside her, his uniform bearing new insignia that marked him as humanity's official liaison to the galactic community, and his expression held quiet satisfaction. "What will they do with their new power?" Yan-Su asked. Repeating the question she had posed cycles, Agamemnon smiled. "Seo Yan told me during the journey here," he replied. "She said that humanity plans to go back to sleep, because they like dreaming and they have earned the right to rest." He turned to face the ambassador. "But now the galaxy knows that they choose when to wake, and that knowledge will keep developing species safe for generations to come." Yan-Su nodded slowly. "The Dralith believed they were gods," she said, "and they treated lesser species accordingly." She gestured toward the human delegation below. "Humanity could have destroyed them, could have taken their worlds and their technology and everything they possessed. But instead they chose mercy." She met Minchun's eyes. "That is what makes them worthy of the responsibility they now carry." The ceremony ended, and the great hall slowly emptied as representatives returned to their ships and their highs. Homeworld Zhou Yin remained at the speaking platform for a moment longer, looking out at the stars visible through the crystal walls. And she smiled at something only she could see. She had been a child when the nightmares began, drawing pictures of ships among the stars, while tears rolled down her cheeks. And now she stood as the voice of a species that had transformed from prey into protectors. The galaxy stretched out before her, vast and ancient and filled with wonders that humanity had only begun to discover. And she felt 8 billion minds sharing her wonder through bonds that distance could not break. They had been sleeping, they had been violated, and they had awakened to find strength they never knew they possessed. Now they would dream again. But they would dream as guardians rather than victims, watching over those who could not yet watch over themselves. The gods had violated the rule, and the dreamers had taught them why that rule existed. Yan turned from the stars and walked toward her delegation, ready to begin the next chapter of humanity's story. Behind her, the universe spun on through the endless dark, and somewhere in the depths of space, a young species on a small world looked up at unfamiliar stars and wondered what waited for them among the lights. They would never know that humanity watched over them, but they would sleep peacefully, their dreams protected by those who understood what it meant to have those dreams stolen. and that was enough. The cycle passed without response from the Dralith Dominion, and humanity prepared for what came next with the same unified purpose that had carried them through the Battle of Luna. Their fleet had grown to 43 vessels now, each one crewed by dreamers who shared thoughts as easily as other species shared words. And Captain Chai Wonshik led them toward the heart of Dralith space. Minjung Kang traveled with them, serving as liaison between humanity and the galactic community that watched these events with growing fascination and fear. He had expected to find humans consumed by anger, burning with desire for revenge against those who had violated them. But what he discovered instead was something far more unsettling. They were calm, not the forced calm of people suppressing their emotions, but the genuine peace of a species that had found absolute certainty in their purpose. We could destroy them, Wonshik told Minjun as their fleet crossed the boundary into Drelith territory. 8 billion minds focused on a single target could crack planets and shatter stars. He turned to face the liaison officer. But destruction is not justice, and we did not awaken to become the thing we are fighting against. Minjun struggled to understand. They violated your entire species, he said. They stole pieces of your collective soul, and you do not want vengeance. Wonshik shook his head slowly. We want our dreams back, he replied. And we want the galaxy to know that preying on sleeping species carries consequences. But we do not need to become monsters to achieve those goals. The Dralith homeworld appeared on their sensors 3 cycles later, a massive planet orbiting a dying red star, and the defense fleet that gathered to meet them dwarfed anything humanity had faced before. 200 warships formed a wall of ancient death between the human fleet and their destination, and Voranthas himself commanded from a new flagship that bristled with weapons designed to end civilizations. His transmission reached the human vessels as they approached. You have come to your destruction, he announced, and his voice dripped with contempt that 10 million cycles of absolute power had nurtured. Your victory at Luna was a fluke, a momentary embarrassment that we will now correct. Wonshik did not bother responding to the threat. Instead, he gave orders to his fleet, and 43 human vessels arranged themselves in a pattern that made no tactical sense. According to conventional military doctrine on Earth, 8 billion humans closed their eyes and entered the dream state together. The battle began as Dralith weapons opened fire. Beams of energy that could vaporize moons streaking toward the human fleet. And once again the crude human vessels danced through the killing field as if they knew where every shot would land before it was fired. But this time the Dralith had prepared countermeasures. They launched weapons designed to disrupt the neural bonds that connected human minds, psychic dampeners that should have severed the link between the fleet and Earth. And for a terrible moment, the human ships falter. Minjun watched in horror as one vessel took a direct hit, its crew screaming as their connection to the collective consciousness flickered and died. Then, something unprecedented happened. The humans on Earth pushed back. 8 billion minds refused to be silenced, and their combined will overwhelmed the Dralith dampeners through sheer force of numbers. The neural weapons exploded, overloaded by power they were never designed to contain. And the human fleet resumed its deadly dance through the Dralith formation. Voranthas watched his carefully planned defense crumble and felt something he had not experienced in millions of cycles. Fear. He ordered his fleet to close to point-blank range, betting that human intuition could not predict attacks launched from mere kilometers away. And for a moment, his gamble seemed to work. Human ships took damage as Dralith weapons found their marks, hulls breaching and atmosphere venting into the cold void. But the crews did not panic. They knew that every human on Earth shared their pain, and that knowledge gave them strength that individual courage could never match. The battle raged for 6 hours, the longest engagement in galactic history. And when the Dralith fleet finally broke and fled, They left behind the wreckage of 117 warships. Humanity had lost 8 vessels. The survivors pressed on toward the planet below, and the Dralith ground defenses activated. Weapons platforms that could incinerate continents preparing to fire on the approaching fleet. Wanshik gave an order that no one expected. "Hold position," he commanded, and his fleet stopped just beyond weapons range. He opened a channel to the planet below. "We have not come to destroy your world," he announced. "We have come to reclaim what was stolen from us, and if you allow us to do so peacefully, this war can end today." Varinthus responded with contempt. "You threaten the Dralith Dominion with your primitive fleet and expect us to surrender," he demanded. "You are insects who have learned to bite. Nothing more." Wanshik smiled grimly. "We are not threatening you," he replied. "We are offering you mercy that you do not deserve, because destroying your civilization would make us no better than the beings who violated our children." He paused. "But make no mistake, if you force us to take back what is ours through violence, we will do so, and the cost to your people will be remembered for the rest of galactic history." The channel closed, and silence fell over both fleets. Minjun stood beside Wanshik and watched the captain's face, searching for some sign of doubt or uncertainty. But he found only patient determination. "What happens if they refuse?" the liaison asked, and Wanshik turned to look at him with eyes that held the weight of 8 billion minds. "Then we show them that humanity does not make empty threats." Hours passed without response from the Dralith homeworld. Then a new transmission arrived. Not from Varinthus, but from the Dralith Civilian Council, the governing body that administered domestic affairs, while the military handled external matters. "The Dominion is divided," a Dralith elder announced, and her voice carried exhaustion that ages of war had carved into her soul. "Many of us opposed the harvesting from the beginning, but Varinthus and his faction silenced all dissent." She paused. "If humanity promises to spare our worlds and our people, we will help you retrieve what was stolen." Wanshik considered the offer carefully, feeling the collective consciousness of Earth weighing the decision, and after a long moment he nodded. "We accept your terms," he replied. "Guide us to the harvesting stations, and this war ends with mercy rather than destruction." The Dralith elder transmitted coordinates, and the human fleet moved toward massive facilities hidden beneath the planet's northern ice cap. Minjun watched in wonder as enemies became reluctant allies, united by the shared desire to end a conflict that neither side had truly wanted. He began to understand what made humanity different from other species that had awakened throughout galactic history. They had power beyond anything the galaxy had seen, the ability to think as one mind and act with unified purpose. But they chose to use that power for justice rather than conquest. That choice, more than any weapon or technology, made them worthy of the respect that the elder races had forgotten how to earn. The ice cap facilities came into view, kilometers of crystalline architecture holding millions of stolen dreams. And Captain Wanshik prepared his people for the final phase of their mission. "We did not come here to take vengeance," he reminded them. "We came here to bring our children home." The fleet descended toward the ice, and humanity took the first steps toward reclaiming what had been stolen from them. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would never forget this moment. The dreamers had awakened, and they had proven that even gods could be held accountable for their crimes. The first human starship rose from Earth on a morning that the entire planet watched together. 8 billion minds focused on a single moment of triumph that marked the end of isolation and the beginning of something new. Captain Chai Wanshik stood on the bridge of the vessel they had named Dreamer's Wrath, and he felt the collective consciousness of humanity flowing through his thoughts like a river of shared purpose. The ship was crude by galactic standards, built from materials that more advanced species would consider primitive. But it carried something that no other vessel in the universe possessed. Every human on Earth dreamed together now. Their minds linked by bonds that the Dralith harvesting had accidentally strengthened rather than destroyed. And that connection powered systems that defied conventional physics. Wanshik gave the order to engage the drive. And reality bent around his ship as 8 billion dreamers pushed against the fabric of space itself. They crossed the distance to the monitoring station in 3 hours. A journey that should have taken conventional vessels several cycles. And when they arrived, they found Ambassador Yansu Park waiting for them. "You built a fleet in 3 months," she said. And her voice carried wonder that she made no attempt to hide. Wanshik smiled grimly. "We built 17 ships," he corrected. "And more are coming. Because humanity does not do things by half measures when our children have been violated." He led her through corridors that hummed with strange energy, showing her technology that made no sense according to galactic engineering principles. "Our scientists cannot explain how any of this works," he admitted, "but when we dream together, we understand things that waking minds cannot grasp." He paused at a viewport that looked down upon the stars. "The Dralith wanted our dreams because they sensed power there, and they were right. But they made the mistake of assuming they could take that power without consequence." Yansu studied him carefully. "What do you intend to do with that power?" she asked. Wanshik turned to face her, and his expression held something that surprised her. Not rage, not hatred, but cold and patient determination. "We intend to take back what was stolen," he said simply. "And we intend to ensure that no species ever makes the same mistake again." News of humanity's rapid awakening spread through the galaxy like wildfire, and reactions varied wildly depending on who received the information. Younger species celebrated, seeing humanity's rise as proof that the elder races could be challenged, while older species watched nervously, wondering what this unprecedented development meant for the established order. The Dralith responded with characteristic arrogance. Varenthus assembled the largest fleet that his species had deployed in 10 million cycles. Ancient warships carrying weapons that had shattered worlds in ages past. And he announced his intention to end the human threat. Before it could grow any stronger, "These creatures have stolen technology. That belongs to their betters," he declared in a broadcast that reached every corner of civilized space. "And they must be reminded of their proper place in the cosmic hierarchy." His fleet entered Earth's solar system with all the ceremony of conquerors arriving to claim their rightful prize. Min Jung Kang watched from the bridge of his patrol vessel, now stationed near the human fleet as an observer and liaison. And he felt fear clawing at his chest as he counted the Dralith warships, 50 vessels against 17. Each Dralith ship carrying millennia of refined killing technology. And the humans had only their strange dream-powered systems and their stubborn refusal to surrender. "They cannot win this battle," Minjum whispered to himself. And beside him, Captain Wanshik smiled without humor. "Perhaps not by your standards," the human replied. "But we have learned something important about ourselves in these past months." He gestured toward the blue sphere of Earth hanging in the viewport behind them. 8 billion minds thinking as one can accomplish things that no individual could ever imagine. The Battle of Luna began when Dralith weapons opened fire on the human fleet. Beams of coherent energy that should have vaporized the crude human vessels in seconds. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships moved before the weapons fired, anticipating attack vectors that should have been unpredictable, weaving through killing fields with grace that made no tactical sense on Earth. Every human entered a shared dream state simultaneously. Billions of minds merged into a single vast consciousness, processing information faster than any computer, predicting enemy movements through sheer collective intuition, feeding tactical data to the fleet through bonds that distance could not weaken. the Dralith commanders watched in confusion as their carefully planned attack fell apart. Every shot missed, every trap was avoided, every ambush was anticipated, encountered before it could be sprung. The human ships struck back with weapons that seemed to bend probability itself. Shots that found weak points in ancient armor that should have had no weak points. Attacks that disrupted systems protected by millions of cycles of engineering refinement. Min Jin watched the battle unfold and felt his understanding of warfare crumbling. They are not fighting as individuals, he realized aloud. They are fighting as a single organism with 17 bodies. The Dralith flagship took critical damage when 3 human vessels coordinated an attack with timing precise to the microsecond. And Voranthas himself barely escaped in a shuttle as his command ship broke apart around him. The remaining Dralith vessels retreated in disarray, their ancient confidence shattered by an enemy that should not have been able to stand against them. Humanity had won their first battle against beings who called themselves gods, but instead of pursuing the fleeing enemy, the human fleet held position near Luna Captain. One Chick opened a communication channel that broadcast to every receiver in the galaxy, and his voice carried the weight of 8 billion minds speaking through a single throat. To the Dralith Dominion, he announced, "You came to our home to finish what you started, and you have learned that humanity does not submit to those who would prey upon us." He paused, and Min Jin sensed the collective consciousness behind those words. Billions of humans choosing mercy when vengeance would have been so easy. "We do not seek your destruction, but we demand justice for what was stolen from us." The terms were simple: return every fragment of consciousness taken from human minds. Dismantle the harvesting stations. Submit to judgment for violating the celestial accord. You have 1 cycle to comply. One Chick concluded, "And if you refuse, we will come to your worlds and take back what belongs to us." The transmission ended, and silence fell across the galaxy as species waited to see how the Dralith would respond. Dian Su Park stood in her quarters and watched recordings of the battle play across her screens. She had studied humans for 15 cycles, thinking she understood them. But she realized now that she had only glimpsed the surface of what they truly were. They had won an impossible victory, and instead of pressing their advantage, they had offered their enemy a chance to make things right. That restraint frightened her more than any display of raw power could have, because it meant that humanity was not driven by rage or hatred. They were driven by something far more dangerous. Principal Min Chun's face appeared on her communicator. "The Dralith will not comply," he said, and his voice carried certainty, born from long experience with elder race pride. Dian Su nodded slowly. "I know," she replied. "Then, what happens next?" He asked. Dian Su turned to look at the stars once more. "Humanity shows the galaxy what happens when gods forget that even dreamers can wake." She ended the transmission and began preparing her report for the council. The universe was about to change forever, and she intended to ensure that the truth of what happened would never be forgotten. The nightmares spread across Earth like a plague that no medicine could cure. And within weeks, every sleep clinic on the planet overflowed with desperate patients, seeking answers that science could not provide in Seoul. Dr. Han Ji-won reviewed case files that made no sense according to everything she had learned in 20 years of medical training. Thousands of people reported identical dreams. Cold darkness pressing against their minds, vast beings with eyes like dying stars, and a terrible sensation of something precious being torn away. Mass hysteria, her colleagues insisted. But Ji-won knew better. She had experienced the dreams herself, and they carried a weight of reality that ordinary nightmares never possessed. Across the ocean in New York, an emergency meeting brought together the world's leading neurologists, to discuss what they called the global parasomnia event brain. Scans showed patterns that defied explanation. Neural activity and frequencies that should not exist in human minds. And every expert left the meeting more confused than when they arrived. Nobody on Earth understood what was happening to them. But in the vast halls of the Galactic Council, the truth had finally broken free. Min Jung Kang's broadcast reached every corner of civilized space before the Dralith could suppress it. And the evidence he provided shattered the comfortable assumptions that had governed galactic politics. For Millennium Ambassador Yeon-Soo Park stood before the gathered representatives once more. But this time, she did not come bearing accusations. She came bearing proof that could not be denied. Holographic displays showed the harvesting station in terrible detail. Kilometers of crystalline matrices humming with stolen consciousness. Automated systems extracting human neural patterns with mechanical precision. And Dralith technicians overseeing the operation as if they were managing a simple agricultural project. They are dissecting humanity's collective unconscious, Yeon-Soo declared, and her voice echoed through a chamber that had fallen completely silent. Every dream, every fear, every hope that humans experience in their sleep becomes raw material for Dralith experiments. She turned to face the elder race section of the hall. The Celestial Accord exists because we learned the cost of treating developing species as resources rather than people. And now those who created the law have decided that it no longer applies to them. Fuentes rose from his seat. And even across the great distance of the chamber, Yeon-Soo could feel the ancient power that radiated from his form. "These images have been falsified," he announced. And his tone carried the absolute certainty of a being who had never been questioned. "The Monitoring Division seeks to undermine Elder Race authority, and their human sympathizer captain has created elaborate fiction to support their agenda." Younger species representatives shouted in protest, demanding answers and accountability, while older species representatives urged caution and respect for established order. The chamber dissolved into chaos. But then a new transmission arrived from the outer rim, and the display systems automatically broadcasted across every screen in the hall. Min Jung Kang appeared on the transmission, his face battered and his uniform torn, but his eyes burning with determination that nothing could extinguish. "I am transmitting from the edge of Dralith space," he announced, "and I am alive because sympathetic members of other elder races helped me escape." He held up a crystalline fragment that glowed with soft inner light. "This contains the consciousness patterns of 3,000 humans, stolen from a hospital in a place called Bizen, and I removed it from the harvesting station before the Dralith detected my presence." The chamber fell silent once more. "I am not a liar," Min Jung continued, "and I am not a fool who creates fiction to serve political agendas. But I am a witness to crimes that demand justice." His transmission ended, and for a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Vorenthus made a decision that changed everything. "The Dralith Dominion withdraws from council deliberations," he declared, "and any species that interferes with our rightful activities will face consequences beyond their comprehension." He gestured, and holographic displays showed Dralith warships emerging from hidden positions throughout the galaxy. Ancient vessels carrying weapons that had crushed civilizations in ages past. "Humanity is our harvest," Vorenthas announced. "As the original catalogers of their species, we hold divine right over their development, and we will not surrender that right to satisfy the complaints of lesser beings." 3 council observation stations exploded in the following hour, destroyed by Dralith weapons as demonstrations of power that the galaxy had not witnessed in 10 million cycles. The message was clear. The gods had decided that rules no longer applied to them on Earth. The nightmares suddenly stopped. Every human on the planet experienced one final dream on the same night. But this dream was different from all the others. They saw the stars as the galaxy saw them, vast and ancient and filled with civilizations beyond counting. They saw the Dralith, cold and terrible and hungry for secrets that human minds contained. They saw themselves as others perceived them, small creatures on a tiny world, unaware of the universe that surrounded them, sleeping while predators crept closer in the darkness. And then they saw something else. They saw their own potential, the power that slumbered within 8 billion minds, connected by dreams that spanned the globe. The gift that the Dralith had recognized and coveted but never truly understood. 8 billion humans woke at the same moment. And they woke angry. The change began slowly at first, so gradually that scientists dismissed the early signs as instrument errors or statistical anomalies. Technology started behaving strangely around certain individuals. Computers processing faster than their hardware should allow. Communication devices reaching farther than their specifications permitted. Machines responding to wishes that were never spoken aloud. Then people began sharing ideas without speaking them, finishing each other's sentences across continents, knowing things they had never learned through any normal means within weeks. Human engineers built devices that violated every known law of physics. Guided by knowledge that came from dreams they could not remember, but somehow understood perfectly. Their first faster-than-light communication array took shape in a converted warehouse in a city called Inchin, built from salvaged electronics and components that should never have worked together. Powered by the focused will of 17 dreamers who had never met in person, the message they sent reached every receiver in the galaxy. "We know what you did." A pause that stretched across light years. "We are coming." Yeonsu Park stood in her quarters aboard the monitoring station and watched the transmission play across her screens around her. The station buzzed with frantic activity as species representatives tried to understand what they had just witnessed. A dreaming species had awakened, and they had done so faster than any prediction model had ever suggested possible. Her communicator chimed, and Minchun's face appeared once more, his expression mixing wonder and concern. "I am returning to Earth as a liaison," he told her, "because someone needs to help them understand what they have become." Yeonsu nodded slowly. "What will they do?" she asked. Minjun considered the question carefully before answering. "I think they will do exactly what they promised," he said quietly. "They're coming, and the Dralith should be afraid." The transmission ended, and Yeonsu turned to watch the stars once more out there. A species that the galaxy had dismissed as irrelevant was preparing to challenge beings who called themselves gods. She had studied humans for 15 cycles, watching their wars and their kindnesses, their cruelties and their compassions. And she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Dralith had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that humanity would remain asleep forever, content to dream while others decided their fate. They had forgotten the first lesson of the devastation wars. Never underestimate a species that has nothing left to lose. Humanity had lost their dreams, and now the galaxy would learn what happened when the dreamers finally awakened. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of floating crystal and light, and within its shimmering walls, representatives from 400 species gathered to discuss the business of the universe. Ambassador Yeonsu Park stood near the observation windows, her dark eyes watching the endless dance of ships arriving and departing from the station. And she wondered how many of those vessels carried secrets that would never reach the council floor. She had served the monitoring division for 15 cycles now, watching over developing species, cataloging their progress, ensuring that the ancient laws remained unbroken. And in all that time she had never seen anything that troubled her quite like the readings from Sector 7. Earth sat in that sector, a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, and its inhabitants called themselves humans. The galaxy knew them as a dreaming species, still confined to their home system. still unaware that the stars held civilizations older than their sun. And most council members dismissed them as centuries away from relevancy. Yinsu had always found humans fascinating in a quiet way, watching their struggles and triumphs through long-range sensors, admiring their stubborn refusal to surrender to any challenge. But she had never expected them to matter to galactic politics, not yet. Anyway, Celestial Accord governed all interactions between species, and its most sacred rule had stood unchanged for 10 million cycles. Developing species must be allowed to awaken naturally, no interference, no acceleration, no. Harvesting the elder races had created this law after the devastation wars, when younger species rose up against their oppressors and nearly burned the galaxy to ash. And since then the rule had been absolute. The elder races were called gods by many, and not without reason, for their technology could reshape stars and bend the fabric of space itself. And their wisdom had guided the galaxy through countless crises. But even gods could fall to temptation. Yinsu turned from the window and walked through the crowded hall, her translator implant converting the chaos of alien languages into clear meaning. And she searched for her colleague Minjung Kang. She found him near the refreshment stations, his patrol captain uniform crisp despite the long journey from the outer rim. And his expression told her that he had seen the same reading she had, the energy signatures from Earth's sector. He said quietly, and his voice carried the weight of someone who did not want to believe what he had discovered. Yinsu nodded and guided him to a quiet alcove where their words would not carry. "I have confirmed the source," she told him, and watched his face grow pale. The Dralith, the name hung between them like a curse. For the Dralith were among the oldest of the elder races, and their word had shaped galactic law for longer than most species had existed. "They have a station in the Orc cloud," Yinsu continued, keeping her voice steady despite the fear that crawled through her chest. "And the readings indicate active neural harvesting on a massive scale." Minjun closed his eyes and leaned against the crystal wall. "Humans," he whispered. "Millions of them." The implications were staggering. For if an elder race had broken the sacred rule, then the entire foundation of galactic civilization trembled on the edge of collapse. Yinsu had spent 3 cycles gathering evidence, checking and rechecking her data, hoping desperately that she had made some mistake. But the truth remained unchanged. The Dralith were harvesting human consciousness, extracting fragments of thought and dream and memory from a species that did not even know the stars held life. "Why humans?" Minjun asked, and his voice carried genuine confusion. Yinsu had wondered the same thing, and her research had revealed a disturbing answer. "Human neural patterns are unique in the galaxy," she explained, "and their dream state consciousness operates on frequencies we have never encountered before." She paused and gathered her thoughts. The Dralith believe that human dreams hold the key to transcendence, to breaking through the barriers that limit even elder race technology. And they have decided that their desires matter more than the law they created. Minjun straightened and his expression hardened into something cold and determined. "We must bring this before the council," Yinsu agreed. But she also knew the dangers they faced. The Dralith held enormous power within the galactic government, and their representative, Voanthus, commanded respect that bordered on worship from many species, accusing an elder race of violating the accord was not something done lightly. They made their way to the central speaking platform, where council sessions addressed matters of galactic importance, and Yinsu requested an emergency audience. The great hall fell silent as she presented her evidence. Holographic displays showing the energy signatures, the station hidden among the ice and rock of Earth's outer system, the undeniable proof of harvesting technology in active operation. When she finished, she looked to the elder race section of the chamber and found Vorenthus watching her with ancient eyes that held no emotion she could read. These readings are instrument errors, the Dralith representative declared, and his voice echoed through the hall with the weight of absolute authority. The monitoring division's equipment requires calibration. Nothing more. Murmurs spread through the gathered representatives, and Yansu saw doubt on many faces. Who were they to question an elder race? Who was she to accuse the architects of galactic peace? But Minjun stepped forward, and his voice rang clear and strong. I have seen the station with my own sensors, he announced, and I volunteer to lead an investigation fleet to confirm or deny these findings. The chamber erupted in argument, younger species demanding answers while older ones counseled patience and respect for established order. Vorenthus remained silent through it all, and something in his stillness frightened Yansu more than any threat could have. The Dios Council voted to delay any investigation pending further review, a decision that satisfied no one but changed nothing. And Yansu felt the weight of failure pressing down upon her shoulders. But as she left the chamber, a message arrived on her private channel from sources she had cultivated over many cycles. Sympathetic council members had authorized a quiet mission. Minjun would take his ship to Earth's sector and find the truth 3 cycles later. Yansu stood in her quarters aboard the monitoring station and watched the distant stars that hid so many secrets. Her communicator chimed with an incoming transmission, and Minjun's face appeared on the screen, his expression carrying horror that words could barely contain. I found it, he said, and his voice trembled. The station is real, and what they are doing to humanity is worse than we imagined. The transmission cut to visual data, showing crystalline matrices that stretched for kilometers, each one containing fragments of human consciousness stolen from dreamers who would never know what had been taken from the Mayan Sioux. Watched in silence as the evidence played out. Millions of humans violated in their sleep, their minds harvested like crops by beings who considered themselves gods. I am broadcasting this to every receiver in the galaxy, Minjun told her, because the Council will not act unless the truth cannot be hidden. The transmission ended abruptly, and Yansu knew that the Dralith had detected the intrusion. She could only hope that Minjun escaped, and that his broadcast reached enough ears to matter on Earth. In a small house in a quiet city, a young girl named Seo Yeon woke from a nightmare filled with cold stars and watching eyes. She climbed out of bed and found paper and colors, and she drew a picture of a ship flying among the stars while tears rolled down her cheeks. When her mother found her in the morning, Seo Yeon looked up with eyes too old for her young face. They are hurting us, she whispered, but someone is coming to help. Her mother held her close and dismissed the words as childish imagination, but Seo Yeon knew the truth, for she had dreamed it, and humanity's long sleep was finally coming to an end.